The dinner was hosted at Estella, the kind of restaurant where the menus are leather-bound and the butter comes in curls. They'd rented the private room. Soft lighting, heavy drapes, and a champagne tower glinting like something out of a launch party, which in a way it was. Camille stood at the head of the table, glass raised, smile tight and curated. "To dreams," she said, pausing just long enough for the room to lean in. "And to the deal that made mine real." The table erupted. Applause. Laughter. Someone whistled. She beamed, chin tilted slightly, like she was angling for the best possible press photo. I sat at the far end, 3 seats from the door, one arm hooked around the back of my chair like I might still decide to leave. She wore red, because of course she did. Statement dress, tailored like armor. And when the producer beside her slid a sleek velvet box across the table, Camille opened it with a flourish. "They said it's custom," she purred, pulling out a plaque the size of a hardcover. Gold plate, mahogany trim, and etched across the center. "She who weaves worlds deserves to live in one." I knew that line. Not because it was hers. Because it wasn't. I wrote it at 3:17 a.m. in the margins of a legal pad, hands shaking after my second panic attack that week. I'd scribbled it while waiting for a script rewrite that never came, back when I still believed maybe one day Camille would share credit. That maybe this was still our story. She held it up like it meant something to her, as if she remembered the moment it was born. But she hadn't been there. I had. Someone passed the plaque around. Compliments flew like confetti. "So poetic. You always had such a gift. That should be on merch." Camille laughed, modest, humble, false. "It just came to me." I didn't speak, didn't blink. Just reached for my water and let the condensation slip down my wrist as I held the glass. The room buzzed with praise, but I watched it from the edge like a ghost at her coronation. She raised her glass again and toasted her muse. Not me, of course, not the writer, just the inspiration. And I realized then, she didn't thank the person who gave her a voice. She thanked the mirror, because I wasn't her muse, I was her ghost. They said I was the brain. But no one asked what it's like to live without a face. I wasn't always invisible. There was a time when Camille and I shared a room, a stack of journals, and a secret language built from dog-eared books. We used to stay up whispering about the stories we'd write together one day. She'd pick the names. I'd write the scenes. We were a team once. Before the spotlight found her and forgot me. Camille's star began with a blog. She posted quotes, ones I'd written for fun, alongside mood boards and filtered selfies. Her captions sparkled. Mine, really. But no one knew that. People called her relatable, witty, a fresh voice in fiction. She called me her editor, said it like a favor. Then came the idea. A YA fantasy series, she said, between sips of oat milk cold brew. Something dramatic, like a girl with a sword, but emotional trauma too. I laughed. I thought she was joking. She wasn't. I sketched out a sample chapter that weekend. She called it magic. She posted a teaser online, under her name. It blew up. Agents reached out. She told me, "This is our shot. You write, I pitch." I told myself it was okay. We were sisters. I didn't need the credit. Not right away. She emailed me a contract labeled administrative cleanup. Said her agent needed it for tax purposes. I signed it while eating leftovers in her apartment kitchen. Didn't even read it. I trusted her. Book 1 sold in a week. Then 2 more in preempt. Camille was suddenly the next big voice in women-led fantasy. Book tours, panel invites, sponsorships. I watched her praise the prose I bled for. She sent me checks, quiet ones. Just enough to keep me in freelance work and therapy. Mom called her the visionary. Dad said we made the perfect duo. Camille's the face, Liana's the brain. But brains don't sell out theaters. Brains don't get applause. I wrote entire chapters from her notes that read, "More drama here, and make the girl cry but smartly." She called herself a vibes first writer. I wrote the words. She walked the carpets. She didn't need to steal my name. She had something better. My silence, and I held on to it. Because deep down, I thought she'd make space for me eventually. Thought she'd turn around one day and say, "It's time." She did, but not for me, for Netflix. She didn't just take my voice, she sold it, and signed the receipt with her smile. I found out the way most betrayals reveal themselves. Not through confession, but paperwork. It was a Tuesday, the kind of day no one remembers. I just sent off a pitch to a client when an email slid into my inbox. Subject: International Licensing Rights, Verification Request. I almost deleted it. I didn't recognize the sender, but something made me open it. Inside was a brief note from a legal assistant working with a distribution firm in Berlin. They were finalizing a contract for a streaming adaptation of The Kingdom Below, Camille's breakout hit. They wanted to verify the identities of any contributors who might be eligible for credit. There was a list. 6 names. Hers at the top. Mine wasn't there, but one footnote caught my eye. A clause buried deep in the contract language. All adaptation, translation, and merchandising rights secured under the 2020 agreement, with sole-named author Camille Hart. I sat perfectly still. Letiti. That was the year Camille flew to LA for meetings. The year she asked me to pause book 4, to let things breathe. She said she needed space. Said she was figuring out the next phase. She'd already figured it out. She just didn't want me in it. I opened my old documents, scrolled through a dozen dusty folders. Then I found it. The contract I signed in her kitchen. "Administrative cleanup," she'd said. I opened it slowly like it might explode, and it did. Paragraph 4, subsection B. I had signed over everything, not just royalties, not just credit, everything. Film rights, translation, spin-offs, even the right to deny my own involvement. I was a ghost by law, an unperson in the world I created. I should have cried, should have called her. But all I could do was sit there and stare, not just at the words, but what they meant. That while I was fixing commas and softening dialogue, Camille had been meeting with studios. Agents, foreign reps. She wasn't building a career. She was erasing the only other name in the room. She didn't forget me. She planned around me, and she won. A week later, I watched the teaser drop online. A Netflix banner, a moody voiceover, scenes I had imagined in silence now rendered in cinematic gold. Story by Camille Hart. Nothing else. My phone lit up with texts from people I hadn't heard from in years. "You must be so proud of your sister." "She's such a visionary." "Crazy how far she's come, right?" No one knew, because no one was supposed to. And then, quietly, my name showed up where it wasn't meant to. A metadata tag. Some intern had uploaded a licensing file to the wrong public drive. My pseudonym was still attached to the original outline from 4 years ago. That's how the lawyer found me. That's how the credits nearly cracked. But Camille's team moved fast. The file vanished within hours. My inbox was flooded with clarifications. A new NDA appeared. Attached was a friendly note. "For your continued discretion and loyalty, we're offering an increased advisory fee." Advisory, like I'd been watching, not writing. I didn't respond. I didn't sign. Instead, I opened a blank document, typed one sentence. She wrote the contract, I wrote the story. I sat back in my chair, hands still shaking, and understood something I had never said aloud. She didn't just take my voice. She packaged it, sold it, and smiled for the cameras while I stayed silent. But not anymore. She wrote the contract, I wrote the future. I didn't threaten her, didn't leak receipts, didn't post threads about ghostwriting or betrayal. Instead, I made a quiet decision. I would become undeniable. The night after I saw my words on a Netflix teaser, I registered a new domain. LM. Hart. Initials only, no social links, no past. Just a clean slate with one blinking cursor. I wrote every day for 3 months. Not fantasy this time, but fiction with edges. Sisters who lie, women who vanish, protagonists who don't forgive. I didn't show the manuscript to anyone, didn't workshop, didn't announce. I submitted it under a pen name I'd been holding close for years. One I never used, one Camille didn't know. A boutique publisher picked it up in 6 days. The editor's note said, Your voice is so sharp, it slices without blood. That was the moment I knew I didn't need Camille's stage. I had my own spotlight now. And it burned cleaner. They scheduled the release 2 weeks before the Kingdom Below premiere. Perfect timing. Not revenge. Just rhythm. I didn't tell anyone. Not even my parents. Let Camille have her moment. The press cycle, the photo ops, the red carpet shot with the caption, "From blogger to blockbuster." I watched quietly, let her have the microphones, until the New York Lit Guild reached out. "We're doing a panel on emerging voices. Would LM Hart be willing to speak?" I said yes. The panel was live-streamed, low-key but intimate. 6 chairs, a carpeted stage, paper name placards. I wore black, no branding, no makeup, just a plain name tag and the truth under my tongue. The moderator introduced me as the breakout author behind Daughters of Dust, a novel critics are calling the next big voice in literary realism. The word voice lingered. I talked about process, about silence, about writing stories that don't need applause. And then, during Q&A, someone in the crowd asked casually, "Was Daughters of Dust inspired by anything personal?" I smiled. Every word. No drama, no call-outs, just presence. But the clip spread. Within days, online readers started comparing sentence structure, phrase patterns, dialogue quirks. One Twitter thread read, "It's wild how Daughters of Dust sounds more like Kingdom Below than Kingdom Below does." That's when the questions started. Not from me, from readers. And then came the critic. A soft-spoken reviewer from the Chronicle posted a side-by-side analysis. Camille Hart's adaptation feels like fan fiction of a book she never wrote. It went viral. Suddenly, everyone was whispering. Was LM Hart the real mind behind Camille's empire? I didn't answer. Instead, I accepted an invite to speak at the Valentine Literary Conference, the same one Camille had headlined 3 years prior. The opening panelist introduced me as LM Hart, whose distinct voice and quiet ferocity are redefining a genre. I didn't look for Camille in the crowd, but I knew she was watching. The whispers were loud now, not mine, but theirs. And when a critic stood up during the reception and said aloud, "Hart's sentences hit like truths we forgot we buried," I raised my glass, not to reply, but to remember. Because this time, the name they clapped for wasn't hers. It was mine. She wrote the contract. I wrote the future. She used to call me replaceable, but I didn't disappear. She did. The reviews landed soft at first, like the kind of rejection no one says aloud. A few articles used phrases like visually ambitious, narratively thin. One headline said Kingdom Below was a feast for the eyes, but emotionally malnourished. A podcast joked it felt like the plot was written by someone who read the outline, not the book. They weren't wrong. Camille posted a black and white photo of herself on premiere night, eyes closed, captioned, "Gratitude, always." But the comments below told a different story. Something about this feels off. This doesn't sound like the book I remember. Did anyone else notice the new novel, Daughters of Dust, feels like the real deal? I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The echo had started, and Camille couldn't mute it. A week later, Daughters of Dust hit the New York Times bestseller list. Number 6. 2 slots above Camille's adaptation tie-in edition. That was the first time Mom texted me in over a year. "Mom, Camille isn't doing well. Maybe you could talk to her?" No punctuation, no apology. Just a mother reaching for the daughter who finally had a name worth mentioning again. I didn't respond. I watched quietly as Camille doubled down. New Instagram reels, soft focus videos of her creative process, her writing desk staged with scented candles and untouched notebooks. She captioned one. "Sometimes the muse gets tired. Be gentle with yourself." Comments were limited on that post. The last time I saw her in public was in the background of a panel livestream. She wasn't speaking. Just seated, still, dimming. She wore a white blazer and too much concealer. Her expression was composed, but her hands moved constantly, adjusting cuffs, smoothing the tablecloth, twisting her ring. And I realized something I hadn't before. She wasn't afraid of being forgotten. She was afraid of being misunderstood, because deep down, she knew the applause was for something she couldn't recreate. Not because the story had changed, but because the storyteller had left. My favorite bookstore placed Daughters of Dust in the front window, next to a chalkboard sign that read, "Real Stories, Real Voices." Camille's books weren't on display that week. Her publisher didn't reprint the film edition after the first run stalled. People stopped quoting her captions. They stopped asking if I'd help write the next one. No one talked about Camille anymore, not even our family. At Thanksgiving, the table was smaller. No toasts, no grand declarations. Just the quiet kind of meal where people chew more than they speak. Someone mentioned publishing. Dad looked at me, started to say something, then stopped. Camille wasn't mentioned once. She used to call me the backup plan. Now I was the only one still on stage. But there's no joy in watching someone fall, even if they once stepped on your shoulders to climb. There's just distance, a recognition that the person who hurt you isn't in control anymore, but they're still living with what they did. A reader once emailed me, "There's something lonely about your sentences, but it's the kind of lonely that makes you feel seen." I wrote back, simply, "I know." Because this wasn't revenge. Not really. This was the sound that happens after a name stops echoing in someone else's mouth and starts living in your own. She built her empire with my words. I built mine with my name. I never confronted her. No dramatic email, no carefully worded letter, no final conversation where I listed what she took and how it felt. I didn't need her to admit anything. I just needed her silence. And I finally had it. The last message she sent was months ago. A short DM, no greeting, no name. "If you're going to keep writing, at least spell our family name right." I didn't answer, just blocked the account and kept typing, because now the only person I was writing to was me. When the paperback of Daughters of Dust came out, I sat in the back corner of a small indie bookstore while a young girl approached the counter holding a copy. She had braces and chipped nail polish, and she turned to her friend and whispered, "This one made me feel like I wasn't crazy." Her friend nodded. "Same." I underlined like half of it. They didn't see me. They didn't need to. That was the point. A few weeks later, I was invited to speak at a literary festival in Oregon. The room wasn't huge, maybe 60 people in folding chairs, but they leaned in when I spoke. They took notes. One woman raised her hand near the end and asked, "Where did Daughters of Dust come from? What made you write it?" I paused. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because for once I wasn't afraid to say it. "It came from silence," I said. "The kind that tries to erase you. The kind you learn to survive inside." There was no gasp, no dramatic reaction, just quiet understanding and nods from people who'd lived through the same. After the panel, a woman in her 50s approached me. She didn't say much, just handed me a folded program with a note inside. "Thank you for reminding me I don't owe anyone a rewrite of who I was." That night, I sat in my hotel room by the window, watching the wind bend the tree branches in slow, patient arcs. I thought about who I used to be, the girl who edited chapters in exchange for praise that never came. The sister who gave away credit like it was currency she wasn't supposed to spend on herself. She's gone now. What's left is quieter, slower, but steadier. I don't explain myself anymore when people ask what I do. I say I write. I say my name. Sometimes I still catch myself hesitating, waiting for someone to question it, to say I'm only here because someone else made space. But then I remember, no one made space. I took it back. One of my favorite readers once sent me a photo of her bookshelf. Daughters of Dust sat between two hardcovers. She wrote, "This one made me feel seen, like someone left a light on for me." I stared at that photo for a long time, because that's all I ever wanted. Not applause, not revenge. Just proof that I'd lived, that my voice had outlasted the version of me they tried to narrate. The dedication in my second novel reads, "For the girls who were always asked to stay behind the curtain, I don't write about Camille anymore. She's not the story. I am. Some stories aren't about revenge. They're about reclaiming what should have never been taken. Your name, your voice, your place. At Reddit Reveal, we don't chase drama. We uncover what's been buried. Truth, identity, quiet power. Because not everyone needs forgiveness. Some just need the silence to end. Have you ever had to take your story back? Share it in the comments. Your voice might be the one someone else needs to hear today.